Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome all of you to attend North China Public Lecture. And actually today is a very special one. I'm Carol Chen, Senior Manager for External Relations from the Business School. Before the start of the lecture, we have some exercise to do as usual. So please now switch your mobile to silent mode. Okay, now you can scan the QR code on the left side on the screen, and this is North China WeChat. So for future events and also for the review of this event, you can see that. And then on the right side, it is the live video streaming. So feel free to share with your friends. And then thanks to 浙江泛波信息科技有限公司 Zhejiang Fanbo Information Technology Co. Limited for sponsoring the live video streaming. You can take the photos or short videos during the speech, but please remain seated. Okay, now without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Martin Lockett, Dean of Nottingham University Business School, China, to introduce our guest today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to welcome Michele Garacci back to the university. A number of you will know him, may even have been taught by him. I was going to say, there's a recent article in the Chinese press in Ningbo and elsewhere where one of his students said how great a teacher he was, but he was also very strict and really wanted a top performance. We can see that in his current role, which is as Under-Secretary of State at the Italian Ministry of Economic Development, where he leads some great efforts to promote Italy's position in world trade and in terms of investment, but also the relationship with China. And you've seen that already in the videos we're just seeing related to Xi Jinping's recent visit to Italy, where Michele has had a significant influence on policy there, and that's what he's going to be talking about today. Just in terms of background, he's a professor of practice here at the university, on leave at the moment, and I was going to say we're delighted that he's able to come back for the first time since he left to his new role. He knows China very, very well, as having lived here from 2008 until last year. He's well known for his work in analyzing the Chinese economy, trade, investment, as well as other areas, including mergers and acquisitions. So I'm really delighted to welcome Michele back to talk today about Italy and China, a new chapter of economic ties. So join me in welcoming Michele Garacci.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone. Very, very happy to be here. Today is a very important day for me personally because I'm finally back here at Nottingham University after several months of being in Italy now. I'm here today basically to tell you two things. The first one is to say thank you. Thank you to UNNC. Thank you to everyone who over the last few years has supported me, has helped me in my career, develop my career here as a professor. I came here 6 years ago, and over the course of those years, I have engaged as much as I could on trying to understand the development of the Chinese economy with the goal to let our at the time, Italian and European government and the companies understand what was going on here in China. And the one thing I noticed is there was a very little understanding about the major transformation of the economy that was taking place here in China and that has taken place over the last 40 years. Every person I've met we are a group of people who have lived in China. I've been in China 10 years, 2008, 2018. Some people have been here in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s. All these group of people that have been in China roughly for 10 years. Each of us has had the honor and the luck to experience in our own 10 years a major transformation of a country as big as China. No matter if this was the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, and now this last decade, every 10 years has been spectacular, and I've been lucky enough to see the last 10 years. So I've only been able to reach this new position in my career in the Italian government thanks to UNNC. And so I'm here to say thanks to all of you, the students, the professors, the dean. I say thanks to Martin, to the previous deans, Carl Fay, Chris O'Brien, and Peter Hoffman, fundamentally for allowing me to have the freedom to pursue interest. And I believe this is a key thing in academics. Everyone can choose their research field, and the UNNC has been a spectacular place for allowing that kind of flexibility, maintaining teaching standard. Martin says I was very strict with my students. I don't know if that's true, but perhaps, yes, I was. But this is because I would like that every student tries to push themselves to reach the best. And if you have been some of my students, I hope that experience will be useful in the future lives. Because what I do now is work 20 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are no weekends, there are no holidays. The world spins every minute, and we need to react to that. But the big thanks goes for the learning I had here, and I re-emphasize the flexibility that is key for everyone to pursue its own interest. So a big thanks. The second thing is to tell you what we're doing in Italy. And I want to do this a little bit very interactive, so I will not talk too much. I will leave a lot of space for Q&A because I know maybe you are curious. The news of the week has been, of course, Italy signing the Belt and Road MOU with the Chinese government. This is something that we have worked on with the other ministries since I have joined the government. This is one of the first things that I have put on the table of the Italian government. I told you, I always had the feeling the European and especially Italian government, the previous ones, the companies, people did not have enough knowledge of what was going on in China. So my first goal was to engage a learning process, almost as if I was in university again, trying to transfer the little knowledge that I had acquired here and try to put China back at the center of the economic and political discussion of the Italian government. And so we set up first a task force, the Task Force China. That was back in October, which is the first time any European government does something like this. It's a working group made up by components of all ministries. So it is run by us in the Ministry of Economic Development, but it takes input from all ministries, finance, education, science, tourism, and so on, because we want to basically create a single point of contact with China. And we have set up this task force to start telling people what is happening in China. That was the first thing we did. The second, we start working on negotiating another memorandum of understanding, less well known, but equally important. Italy and China in November signed a memorandum of understanding for cooperation in third countries. So basically, that means that Italy and China want to work together in developing countries that are outside China and outside Italy. And the thing that comes to our mind first is Africa. Africa is the country where China has invested, the continent where China has invested the most, $400 billion US in various infrastructure energy projects. And Italy wants to be part of this developing process. And so we signed this agreement that will allow Italian and Chinese companies to go together in Africa, but also other parts of the world, but mostly Africa and the Mediterranean areas, so that those countries can have a sustainable social and economic development. Then we did the memorandum on the Belt and Road last week, which, as you probably have seen, was very attracted a lot of criticism by, first of all, by our government opposition in the parliament, by the media, Italian media, by the Europeans, some European governments, by the American government. Almost everyone was criticizing us for doing this signature of this MOU. But we think it was the best and the right thing to do. And so we, of course, carried on with the idea. And the reality is that China and Italy have always had a very close relationship, not just for the times of Marco Polo and Li Mado and other Jesuits that came here in the 1500s, but even in 1970, Italy was one of the first countries to establish a diplomatic relationship with China. And you can imagine, in 1970, we also attracted some criticism from our American allies. And next year, we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of this diplomatic relationship. A few years ago, 2 years ago, Italian President Mattarella also came to China. Our previous Prime Minister Gentiloni also attended the Belt and Road seminar, was one of the few Prime Ministers of a European country to attend the Belt and Road seminar. And so really for us and for me, that was a natural setting up for us continuing and maybe accelerating this relationship. And so signing the MOU on the Belt and Road, in our view, was a natural extension of the previous activities. We believe next year we will also have a return visit from President Mattarella back to China that meets the visit of President Xi last week in Italy. This memorandum of understanding comes from the need for Italy to regain its place in the international trade arena. We look at the numbers. You know, I look at numbers, and I think numbers always tells a objective story. We always tell each other, Italy and China do a lot of business, the commercial relationship is very good, we do lots of activities, many Italian companies are in China, many Chinese companies are in Italy. This is not true 100%. Italy does not do good business with China. Italy exports to China 13 billion euros, France and the UK 19, 20, Switzerland 22, Germany 87. And so Italy is the country amongst the big European countries that does the least business with China, only 13 billion, very little. So this was the first alarm, the first warning bell that made us think, well, listen, maybe then we should do more. This is on the current account, on the trade balance. Then we look at the capital account, the investment side. And again, people say China has invested a lot in Italy, roughly 22 billion euros. And it looks a lot. But then again, we compare it with the figures from that China has invested in other countries. In Switzerland, came China, did 45 billion only with one acquisition of Syngenta, fertilizer company. In the UK, China has invested 90 billion. In the United States, 180. Again, in Italy, 22. So even on the capital account side, on the investment side, Italy lags behind that of its European competitors. And then we look at the other way around. We look at how much does Italy invest in China. Again, the value of the Italian investment into China, by coincidence, is also around 20 billion. I'm talking about stocks over the last 15 years. And so people would say, well, this investment flow is balanced. China has invested a total of 22 billion in Italy, and Italy has invested pretty much the same amount back into China. But if you look behind these two nominal figures, you notice a very important difference. Chinese investment in Italy have all been M&A, almost all, and Italian investment in China have been almost all, greenfield. So Italian 20 billion invested in China has only been used to open up new factories, new facilities, but not to do acquisitions of existing companies, while almost all of the 22 billion that China has invested in Italy has been on acquisition. Another big example, again, ChemChina, acquisition of tire manufacturer Pirelli. What does this mean? The implication is clear that when you do M&A, the kind of acquisition that, the kind of investment that I don't particularly like, and I will tell you why, does not really have an immediate, direct impact on the economy of the host, of the receiving country. Because it seems that it is just an exchange of shares in the secondary market between the old shareholder and the new shareholder. So immediately the money does not go to the company, goes to the old shareholder. And so the company doesn't get a penny, unless there is an infusion of new capital, but that would be another activity. The M&A itself, the acquisition, brings no money to the company. It can bring new management, it can have other advantages, but that's harder to quantify, and it may do so. But it's a if. On the other hand, the greenfield investment is the type of investment that is $1 for $1. $1 investment in greenfield is $1 in GDP. And of course, it brings also employment opportunities. And if we then compare the flows of 20 billion China invested in Italy and 20 billion of Italy invested in China, same value, different types. One is M&A, the other one is greenfield. Chinese company in Italy have created about 3,000 jobs, thanks to these 22 billion that Chinese company have invested in our country. On the other hand, Italian investment in China, same amount, 20 billion, have created 100,000 jobs. And this is because it has all been greenfield. So, we want to balance that. And one of the first policy that we are implementing is to try, of course we are an open economy, we do not have a lot of state-owned companies. If a private company wants to be sold, they will be free to do so. But as far as we can try to influence incoming investment into Italy as much as we can going into greenfield or brownfield. So expansion of existing capacities. So if you go on a list of preferences, we have at the top greenfield, then we have brownfield, and at the bottom we have M&A. But again, this is not the 10 commandments, okay? So we will do case by case an analysis, and we will assess if that specific investment is something that we would like or not. But just to give a very general framework, this is the pecking order of the type of investment that we want to do. On the other hand, we also would like Italian company to come to China. And the paradox is that we also want to acquire or do investment in existing Chinese companies. And so we're very happy when the Chinese government upgrades the negative list and allows more and more foreign companies to acquire or to make investment into Chinese company, because we want to attract investment of a good quality, the greenfield, but our company also want to participate in this growing market that is China. And so far, they haven't been able to do it. So this goes to the core of what I do. I am responsible for Italian international activities, so trade and investment. So everything that Italian companies do in terms of trade, incoming and outgoing, and everything that Italian companies do in terms of investment. So basically I'm responsible for the balance of payment international section, and we do this in two ways. One is policies, the other one is promotion. So you can think of a 2x2 matrix. That's my job description. Rows and columns. Trade, investment, policy, and promotion. This 2x2 matrix. So in terms of trade, of course, trade policy, as you know, is unified at a European level. So we negotiate free trade agreements tariffs, non-tariff barriers with other countries at EU level, so that's done in Brussels. But even now, we want to change that in the way that up to now, Italy has almost given up the playing an active role in this policy decision. I arrived into Italy, and the first thing I asked my colleague was, so how do we deal with the trade policy? And the answer was, they do it in Brussels. And I said, who is Brussels? And Brussels is us. Brussels is also Italy. Italy is a founding member of the European Union. The thing that we forgot over time is that we can also contribute to a common European policy. We don't need to outsource it to people that are in Brussels only, because Brussels is not an abstract concept. It's an association made up by 28 countries. And so the first thing I did is to have Italy play a more active role at European Union level in the negotiation with free trade agreement. And so we have been looking at benefits, cost and benefits of the free trade agreement with Canada, with Japan, with Vietnam, and now we are almost entering a negotiation on free trade agreement with the United States. The second approach that I brought was, of course, maybe my former experience here, try to do more numbers and more analysis rather than just ideological, political views. Our goal is to make sure that our citizen standard of living improves. The economy, the society is stable, and in order to do that, I wanted our Italian government to go back and do numbers, do analysis, instead of just saying it is right because I say so. And so for maybe one of the first time in many years, from now on, we will look at doing cost-benefit analysis of free trade agreement. And so we set up another task force that looks at cost and benefit of all of these free trade agreements. So when we go to Brussels to negotiate free trade agreement with other countries, we will try to be prepared to understand if the free trade agreement is good or bad for Italy. Now, the problem is, and this is why we want to be more active, is that in Brussels, the view is that the market is defined at the borders of Europe. So when the Commission does a cost-benefit analysis, they only do it at European level. Because for Brussels, the market is the whole of the European Union. And so when they decide if the free trade agreement is good or bad for Europe, they never look at the impact on individual country. Because it is the definition of the common market that is the object function. The new course of action, Italy being more active in Brussels, is try to break down this analysis and do cost-benefit analysis on a country-by-country basis. It's something that no report of the European Commission has ever done. And so we want to try to make sure that within a positive agreement for the European as a whole, we want to ensure if that agreement is also good or bad for Italy. And I'm sure other countries would like to do that as well. And so this is a more active role on the policy side. The other leg is the promotion. So we have a budget. My department, my team, run a budget of just less than 200 million euros. And this is to be allocated for promotion activities, fair, marketing, advertising, investment attraction. We are looking at indexes of doing business in Italy, where Italy is at the bottom, or number 51. We want to bring a bit higher. So we're trying to understand why is it, what are the, maybe we need to adjust the matrix that are used or the weighting for each of the components, or maybe we need to communicate more what we are doing. One interesting example that I've learned is that when I try to talk to foreign investors about potential investment in Italy, they worry about Italian strikes. They always say too many strikes, unstable and not so profitable labor law. But then, looking at the numbers, it looks that maybe France and maybe Germany sometimes have more strikes than Italy. So I think there is a problem of one perception. So we need to bring the perception in line, perception and reality, we need to fill the gap. And then we also need to improve the reality itself, because we do have strikes in Italy. So first of all, we need to tell the world exactly how many we have, not let them think how many we have, and then we need to make sure that the situation improves in reality. And we do this for the, again, trade and investment policy. Belt and Road, MOU. For us, we got criticized because people were saying, oh, no, Europe should do this united. We cannot have countries to do things individually. The answer is no. Europe does policy, not promotion. In Europe, we do common trade policy, but we compete on promotion. I promote Italian wine in China, France promotes French wine in China. So we have this very unusual situation that it should be clear. The 28 countries compete with each other. Everyone tries to sell more things to its trade partners, but we do it within a common set of rules. So we are partners in the policy area, and we are competitors in the promotion area. And so for us, the MOU is a promotion tool. It's not a policy tool. We are not changing tariffs between Italy and China. We are not changing barriers to entry. That is and continues to be done by Brussels. And so the criticisms that we received by people that said, no, the Belt and Road Initiative should be a European initiative, we replied by saying, no, because this is not a policy initiative. This is a promotion initiative. And to prove that, we have reminded the European Union that Italy was not the first country in the European Union to sign it. It was the number 14th. Other 13 European countries have signed the MOU on the Belt and Road with China. So when we received the criticism that we were breaking ranks with the European Union, we say, we are not. We are the 14th country. In fact, we are late. The other 13 countries have already done it. And then they said, well, but you are the first founding member of the European Union that signs the Belt and Road Initiative. And I said, don't worry. In a few days, there will be another country that will sign it. And 3 days ago, Luxembourg, founding member of the European Union, one of the 6 members, also signed the Belt and Road Memorandum. And then they said, but you are the first G7 country. And I said, Italy is not a G7 country. Italy is the 9th economy in the world. The G7 is not the 7th biggest economy, because China itself is not in the G7. So at best, we are G8. And then they say, yes, but you are the first large country in Europe. And so this thing was going on until, it's like finding a solver in Excel for the objective that you want to make sure that Italy was isolated in being the only country to do this. And then we went all the way and said, listen, this Belt and Road Initiative is an initiative. That's what the I stands for at the end. And the fuel of this initiative is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, even if the AIB maybe does not always want to be associated 100% with the Belt and Road. The AIB, the bank, is financed by China, but all the 28 members of the European Union. And in fact, every country in the world except 2, US and Japan. So then we responded to the criticism by saying, listen, yes, we may be the biggest European country to sign first. We may be the biggest founding partner, but the Belt and Road already exists. Exists because 28 countries have not just signed an MOU, but they have paid cash to subscribe to the share capital of the AIB. And this may be a more important from a practical point of view because you take 3-4 billion from your pockets and you put them into the IAB. 2, it is an equally strong political sign to participate in this Chinese-sponsored bank, then he would be signing the MOU on the Belt and Road. And so we are trying to explain to our European friends and to our American friends that we are not breaking ranks. We are just joining the group of countries that have participated. And basically, it is everyone in the world in different levels. Some people have paid, some people have signed, some people have received investment from China. But we are not in no way the only country that does that. So, little by little, I think the narrative of Italy being isolated is changing, and we will have, as I've always say, more and more countries to sign this Belt and Road initiative. So for us, it's a promotion tool. It's a promotion tool, first of all, objective number 1, that I never said at the beginning, but now I can, was to let people in Italy talk about China. Never in the history of Italian media there has been so much coverage about China as it has been in the last month. So for the first time, you go from the morning news, talk shows, all to the evening, and every channel has been talking about China. And for me, this is already a great achievement for our country, because the first level is knowledge. And people have heard, have talked about it, not always have said the correct things, but that will be fixed later on. At least China is now in people's mind for the first time. And so people ask questions. And when people ask questions, they look for answers. And when they find answers, they decrease the uncertainty. And when the uncertainty decreases, the risk or the perception of the risk decreases. And when the perception of the risk, the denominator of the C divided by R value formula, increases the value of the potential investment activity, and so there is a higher propensity to invest. So we have tried to decrease the risk, the discount rate, whatever you want to call it, by at least informing people and at least telling something, and knowledge decrease uncertainty. So objective number 1 is, has been achieved, and so we're very happy about this. The other point I want to make today, and then I stop and I open for question, is that in Italy we have an issue to solve, that is how do we engage in trade policy with other countries? Should we be open, free market, free trade agreement, or should we have some barriers to investment, to trade? And the way that we are thinking, the initial hypothesis is that I believe, and you can tell me if you agree or not, because you're all expert in this, that free trade is very positive for the economies involved. It increases the income and the GDP of both countries involved. So it is good on average. But within the average, there are losers. So what happens is that it decreases income disparities between countries. Both countries increase their income, the gap narrows, but it tends to increase disparity within the country. And so the question that we have is, should we have as objective function the GDP of Italy as a whole? Or can we sacrifice a little bit of the GDP in exchange for having a more distributed, more evenly distributed income? And in the case of Italy, the question is even more important because I believe that our people are not ready for globalized competition. They have not been told the things that are happening here in China, the things that happen in India, Vietnam, Indonesia, in Asia. They are not ready to react because the gains from trade occur when there is mobility of industry. So Mr. X should now stop doing what he does and move on to another sector. And there should be also geographic mobility, so people should move from where they are to the other place where that new job needs a new workforce. But I have seen that our people in Italy are not ready to do that. They don't have the flexibility to change. They don't have the frame of mind. They have not been told, they have not been taught about this way of globalization that was coming. And so now they find themselves in a situation where what I've called it this big wave, this tsunami coming from Asia that is based, incidentally, on a very similar industry that Italy does. The manufacturing of China, the manufacturing of Asia has a very high degree of overlap with what Italy does. And our manufacturing companies are very small. We don't have a very, very big company that make things. We all have very, very small companies. And so this very small company, they find it more difficult to react. Then we noticed this problem. We talked to the European Union, and the European Union has a globalization fund. The globalization fund is used, in theory, to compensate the losers of this effect of open trade. Open trade, to me, is like a Darwinian process. So like Charles Darwin. The average increases, but the weak die. And so that's the question. Do we look after the average quality of the population and we sacrifice the individual, the weakest, or we do look after the weakest? So is it maximizing the average or minimizing the loss strategy? That's the question. And we are debating this. And we are trying to see what is the possible solution. But not just the people mentality is a little bit not ready, but I told you the structure of Italian manufacturing is weak when it comes to globalization. Why is it that Germany exports 7 times more than Italy does in China? Italy, Germany, and China are all 3 countries export-led economies. Italy, much more than China. China has about 20% of its economy coming from export. Italy has about 1/3. So a lot. So Italy is very good at exporting. 1/3 of all Italian GDP comes from export. So what is the problem? Why does Italy do so bad with China and so well with Europe, with the US? The United States is our biggest partner for trade surplus. Half of all our world trade surplus comes from the United States. Half of our exports go to the European Union. We have 450 billion of export, 220 billion go to Europe. So we do very well in export, in Europe, in America, in the West, but we don't do well in China. And the reason is that our company, of course, we have a much more common culture with the European market, with the Western market. We have a history of exporting, so that's a solidified relationship that works very well. When it comes to China, the numbers, I told you again, Italy exports 13 billion, Germany 87. One of the reasons is the composition of the size of the company that exports. If I divide, very simply, large companies and small companies, Germany's export, 87% of German export is made up by large companies. When it comes to Italy, Italian export is half made up by large companies. So the contribution of large companies to German export is higher than the contribution of Italian company to Italian exports. And large companies then do better because they can approach the Asian, the Chinese market more as a system. They have a little bit more scale. They have more negotiating power. When I say small companies, I'm talking a company of 15 people. Half of Italian exports are done by small companies. Companies of 10, 15 people, they cannot come to China and be very successful. And if I take the glove and I flip it inside out, remember, 87% of 87% of German export is large company. That means 13%, 1 minus 7, 87, 13% of German export is done by small companies. 1-3. In the case of Italy, I told you 50-50. So in the case of Italy, 50% of Italian export is done by small companies. So Italy has a 3-4 times incidence of small company to its export. And so we have to make the effort 4 times. For Italian company, it's 4 times harder to export into new, unknown, difficult market such as China. And this is why the government steps in. And one way to step in is, as I told you at the beginning, one, be more active in trade policy so that tariff, non-trade barriers, free trade agreement are all done in the interest not of Europe as a whole, but first to look at the interest of Italy. And then we do the promotion, which is completely in our own hands. We have a budget for that, and then again, this memorandum of understanding on the Belt and Road is part of this promotion activity, which of course also has a political meaning. But this is why it is also good, because we are not, of course, changing the European alliance. We stay in the European Union. We are still very good friends with the United States. And so this is in no way a shift in geopolitics, like some newspapers have reported. This is a commercial tool. People may say it may not work, or it may work, and I'm happy to engage, but this is why we did it. We did it to make sure that Italy exports from 13 goes to the level of France, 20 billion, of UK, 20 billion. Italian wine is 150 million export to China. French wine is 1 billion, 7 times. Even Ireland does more food and beverage to China than Italy. So we are trying to improve the terms of trade with China. And so we're happy to take criticism, to say, oh, this may or may not work, or you could do something else, but this is what we're doing, and this is the purpose of this MOU. And we think that this MOU will also be helping us to rebalance that investment imbalance. Both the figures, that Italy, we want to accept more Chinese investment, but we also want this investment to be directed mostly into greenfield and brownfield. So just to be clear, I'll repeat it the 3rd times, the new relationship with China, is not a new relationship, it's a continuum of a relation that goes back 50 years ago. I don't know why it's perceived as something new. I understand we accelerated it, and we accelerated because we want to catch up with the time that we have lost in the past. So for us, this is a way to short-circuit and catch up with the other European countries, to do more business with China in terms of trade, to do more business with China in terms of investment. And this is really the countries that criticize us, they are trying to do exactly the same thing. The US, of course, wants to export more to China. We are completely aligned. I've told my counterparts, the Vice Minister of Trade in the United States, we want to do the same things. You want to sell more? That's what you do every day. That's what your president says. And this is what I do. I want to sell more to China. This is what we do. We may compete, but we have the same goal. So there is, in my view, no friction. One other thing I want to say on the domestic market in Italy, and this is one of the activities we're working on, is when after being in China for 10 years, I've stopped using cash. If I lose my phone, I'm dead. Like, I cannot walk, I cannot get a taxi, I cannot pay anything, I cannot eat. And so I have 2, and then I'm going to buy more just in case. So this is cash, and this is a spare wallet. Going back to Italy, it was like being back in the Middle Ages of technology. It was, people still using cash. And so I think, these small companies, you remember, $450 billion of export, $225 billion are done by guys who run company with 10, 15 people. Big effort. I find the company need 3 things. Before they can be international, they need to know how to do business well. And there are 3 legs that I'm working on. One is on the digitalization. Very basic, have a website, make sure you have your product online. The other one is the e-payment. and the other one is the logistic. Because I think that you need the digitalization so the customers can see the goods. E-payment so the customer can pay for the goods, and they need to pay in a quick and effective way. And then the logistic, they need to receive the goods within 24 hours. So the transport, the delivery system needs to be efficient. And so we are trying to improve all these three things. The difficulty and the challenge is that if we do two only of the three, it's useless. If we have people to look and to pay, but they never receive the goods, that's useless. So we need to do at the same time all three in parallel. And this is very challenging. And this is one of the main tasks that we are looking at now. And one example of how we're trying to implement this, to combine this lack of internationalization, this lack of digitalization, and to help our small company to grow, is we launched a program. We call it Erasmus, Startup Erasmus, just like Student Exchange Erasmus. Instead of being student, we allow startup company in Italy to spend a period of 6 months abroad in any country around the world, so that they can, they're young, they have good product, but like all startup, like most startups, they fail. Why do they fail? I'm an engineer, and I know why they fail, because we focus on the supply. We focus on the product. They have no idea of the demand curve. So they live in this vacuum with only a supply curve, and they never cross, so they never find the market. And so we want to make sure that if they have a good product, they need to understand what the market wants. And the market, as I said, now is not just Italy, but is international. So step one is take your suitcase, like I did when I was a young student, and I did my Erasmus back from Italy to the UK. Spend 6 months into an incubator, into an accelerator in another country. First of all, learn to speak English. 2, learn what the other market wants. Maybe your product can be sold in that market. So you have 6 months' time to analyze the demand curve of the market, and it may not be a proxy for the world market, but it's better than always living in your home incubator in Rome or Milan. So open up the eyes, go abroad, talk to other incubators, talk to other startuppers, people that do similar things. Maybe you have a common idea. You can co-develop the product. Maybe other countries have also better financing channels. So we have very, very, very little channels for financing. The angel VC community is very small in Italy. In other countries can be more developed. So we want to make this theoretical goal to allow this company to internationalize more, to grow, to be digital, to be payment, not just on a piece of paper, but we try to do in reality. And so in May, we hope we will have 100, maybe 150 Italian startups to get on a plane and travel and spend 6 months in 6 countries that we have selected, China, Korea, Japan, US, UK, and Slovenia for different reasons. One is a gravity model, the other one is high-tech, and we start. Again, we also got criticism, say, oh, why here, why there, why don't we wait, we do it. No, we do it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, people that come back, when they come back in September, October, November, they will give us the feedback, so we will improve on the second round, because we cannot wait too long. We want to get things done. So on May 1st, hopefully there will be these 100 companies, these 100 people that get on the plane and they come to China. 20 will be in China, 20 in Japan, Korea, and the other countries, just to give a practical feeling to this plan. So, one example of how to turn this philosophy into practice. And of course, my advice to you guys, students, is take all the opportunity, and I know you all have them here at UNNC, to do the exchanges. This is the thing that has really changed my life. I went to do an exchange student. I did the Erasmus. I was the first Erasmus student of my university, so my professor had no idea what it meant. I did go to London. I went to UCL for 1 year. I was doing electronic engineering, and this was the first thing that changed my life. Everything you do every day changes your life, but sometimes you go back and you have pointers. And this was one of the very important changes in my career, because in I cannot tell you, otherwise you know my age. You know, many years ago, I went to school to the UK, and I told my mom, I will only go for 1 semester, maybe 2. And the next time I went back was in June last year, 30 years later, because this initial path of going to London to study took me to England and to the US and then to China for a big tour of the world. And now this is my first job back in Italy. And as the saying goes, these 30 years of experience have been learn, earn, serve. And this is the time to serve the country, earn very little, learn always. And so this is my invitation for you. Continue to learn and continue to do what you like, because this is really the key driver of, in my view, success. Money and the rest will be a positive side effect. I stop here because maybe you have some questions and I'm happy to interact, but I want to invite you to, from today, this is not just one-off lecture. As you can imagine, we are trying to redesign policy, promotion, trade, investment. So any ideas you have, any research you want to share, any research you would like to be put under the nose of some people, or mine, or you want to cooperate, we are very, very happy, and I'm trying to establish a network of people around the world, not just on Chinese economy, but on anything that can help, and we can help each other. We need the input from the academics, we need the input from the research, practical-oriented research, that can be useful for us policymakers. So for me, it's a chance to reconnect with the academic world, and I hope for you guys it's a chance to make your research have a real, true impact. Because if you give it to me and I like it, I will make it happen. So this is the end of the line. So this is a true invitation. My email will be available. Caro, maybe you can distribute it. You know how to find me. I think it's a good opportunity. Martin invited me to come back to teach here. I hope, I love here, but I hope it won't be immediate, because I have lots of things to do still in the government. We have lots of problems, but take advantage of this opportunity, because Italian governments on average last 1 year, and so we're almost at almost there. So, quick, today, tomorrow, send me your interesting papers, okay? Thank you very much.
We'd like to open up now to questions, and we have a microphone available for anybody in the audience. So if you'd like to indicate with your hand if you have a question, then we can start. Yeah, there, please. Okay, there, then there.
Okay, so Mr. Judge, I have a question. Is that so you have mentioned a lot that one of the most major barrier between the cooperation and export and the investment is because lack of information. So do you think that a website like Taobao will similarly reduce this kind of lack of information and educate both sides to have a more efficient market and to learn from each other?
I tell you, there's two things. We can have a website that has the information, but there is a million places where to get the information. The main problem is to get the information to the right people and make sure that they read it.
Okay.
So that's why I said now, if there are things that you think are interesting, give them to me. Don't put them on the website. The website is like having bags on a window shops, and people don't go into the shop. you need to make sure people go into the store and buy it. So this is only the first step, having information, but then you need to push it. It's like having a Weibo account, you post, and you have no visitors. You need to regenerate the traffic. So the website itself is a good and important step, but it's not enough. You need to push the information to the right people.
Okay. So I'm thinking if established platform like internalized Taobao like that, do you think it is possible to have one?
I'm sorry, say again?
So an internationalized like Taobao, something like that.
We didn't understand, sorry. International?
Yeah. So just a platform like Taobao in China, and so maybe
It could be a platform, yes, but that could be a way, and that's what some companies do that, but they need to do more of it. Okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we had a question there, and then we'll have some over on that side. Here, please.
Hello, Professor. I'm a journalist from Ningbo Daily Group. So I'm just wondering about how do you think of Ningbo's role in One Belt, One Road, and how can Italy's involvement on One Belt, One Road contribute to Ningbo's trade and investment? And also, as you said, knowledgement is the first step to promote the communication. So how can you maybe promote the mutual understandings between Ningbo and Italy to let more Ningboese people understand Italy and for more Italian people to understand Ningbo? Thank you.
Well, the first thing I did when I met with President Xi, I reminded him that I was teaching here. So he knows that I here, and so in his mind there is the word Ningbo and Nottingham University. So I did my promotion activity the other way around. I promoted Ningbo and UNNC to the president, who obviously knew, but it's a nice reminder. And of course, on the Belt and Road, we did talk because we have the issue with the Italian ports, that now we have some cooperation with CCCC in Trieste and Genova. And we, of course, for us, Ningbo and Zhoushan and all the area here is a natural point. We want to be the terminal of the Silk Road, but the way we want to do the Silk Road is also both ways. So cooperation with ports is important. There's a few things that we can do with Ningbo. One is exchange, like I said before, of knowledge. Of course, the size of Ningbo port is n times that of our Italian ports, but it's like how to manage, the strategy for containers and cargo, and the route. Because we would like to get traffic as much as possible from the biggest Chinese ports into our Italian ports. As I said, we compete. We prefer that the traffic goes to our ports. This is where I find also difficult, because this gives me opportunity to say, sometimes we got criticized again because we were told, oh, but Europe should have a common strategy for its ports, okay? Now, is Peter Hoffman still here? Or is he, no, I think he's gone. Now, of course, the problem is that we compete. I cannot call my counter minister in Holland and say, listen, from now on, the ships from Ningbo will not go to Rotterdam, will go to Genova. He will put the phone down, no? And so I don't make the call. So the common European policy on ports is tricky, because we compete and we all want that the goods arrive in our place. That's why we have a common rule, so we know the standards, the imports, the tariffs, the quality, the food. It has to be exactly the same, so nothing can go into Europe from a weak door. But once we set this common policy, then we compete on the promotion. We want to make sure that the thing arrives in our port. Other questions?
Dear Understand Secretary, buongiorno. I really appreciate that I have spending 6 months in 2007 exchanging in Italy in Louis University. And but today my question is that I think it's last month the French President Emmanuel Macron just visited some African countries, especially Djibouti. We're used to be the French colonies, but now China had just opened their first military base in Djibouti in 2015, I think. And he warned to the local officials in Djibouti that they need to really caution us about the Chinese overseas investment in Africa, especially in Africa, that they might cause a very huge debt over their business and
Very huge what, sorry?
debt for investment, and they could not pay
Oh, okay.
paid back to this kind of debt, and China might potentially ask for more benefits in this continent. So do you think this kind of understanding is based on a kind of somehow misunderstanding of the French president, of the French government, of China's overseas investment, or just maybe China really posed a dangerous threat to the African countries, and now their economic, maybe for future, they tend to be the military side?
I give you a simple answer. When I was here as a professor, I was very happy to comment on the action of other governments. Now, I don't do it anymore. I have my own things to worry about. Other governments, other presidents can do and say what they like. If they talk to me, I'll reply. But I don't enter into A and B. I let them talk with each other, okay? So I don't enter into this discussion because we don't want to, we have our own issues really to worry about first. This is something I learned in China. China never interferes with the second and third party policy. Chinese policymakers worry mostly about China. I worry mostly about Italy. What France and other countries do in other parts of the world, I only worry insofar as this competes with trying to sell more Italian wine to those countries, okay?
Some questions over there. And, we get microphones. First there, and then there.
And hello, Michelle. I'm actually your colleagues from NUPS. So we're actually in the same floor. I think we accidentally meet each other before you move back to Italy. I have actually two questions. The first one actually is about, we are talking about the trade difference between like Germany to China and Italy to China. You actually emphasize on the scale of the company. But I have a colleague actually was a professor in Italy, and he is particularly focused on teaching family business. And this is what how I get to know. Actually, in Italy, you have quite a lot of population. Actually, they are family business. So I think family business has their particular features. They actually they're more into their family cycles. Will be this actually a reason instead of a scale actually linked to the issues you are talking about the trade to China. So it's maybe not only the scale is small, it's maybe also because of the type of organization you have in the Italy economy. And actually they're pretty good. They have a lot of core competence by generations, which is a real asset. But somehow, do you have any idea, like you're talking about Erasmus Plus, which actually send the young people as startup to other countries? Have you think about how to actually capitalize the core competence of this generationally old family business in Italy also go abroad? This is my first question. The second question is...
But I answer it. You're right. The structure of family business in Italy is a even bigger problem because now it's the time when the generation changes. So these are companies starting in the 60s and 70s, and many owners are now 70, 80 years old. And so, of course, the last thing they do is to invest in China. They just want to retire. And so this is an additional element that prevents them from even taking risks because their sons, daughters don't always want to do that. So in fact, many of these M&A activity that we see in Italy is targeting companies that go over a generational change. And this is another problem that prevents not just the small, but the family and the owner is old, that prevents them from taking those risks.
Have some program which maybe
we do it. So what we try to do it is, for example, with this $200 million of euros of budget, we try to aggregate the small companies into platforms that are closely tied. And so when we promote, we don't promote individual companies, but we promote industry, and even we promote the whole value chain of the industry. So for example, we've been to India a few times in the last few months, and India needs agricultural product. And so we went there by taking association, but not just making food, but it's food processing, the cold chain, and agricultural machinery, and restaurants. So we went and tried to sell or promote the whole value chain in that sector. Of course, one by one, the individual guy making a restaurant or making some ham or cheese could not go to India and do anything. But we took them together and we went to Delhi a few times. And when we do government-to-government meeting, it's like a communication system. B2B, they cannot talk to each other very well, but the B talks to me, B2G within country, G2G across, and then the government of the host country disseminates the idea to his own companies. And by doing this, we help aggregate and bring the problem at G2G level, which generally gets solved in those countries where the government has a strong influence. Where the government has a little influence, like very open market, like Europe, the company do very well. They don't need us, and so we don't need to do too much. But in Asian countries where the influence of the G2G relationship is strong, that's where we are focusing on.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is related to, in the beginning of your talk, you're talking about...
Related to?
The beginning of your talk, you're talking about the Italian government will work with Chinese government actually to make more impact in Africa. And actually, I'm teaching entrepreneurship, so in my class we have also students from Africa, and actually many of my students are here today as well for your talk. Can you say something a bit more in this direction? What will be the future opportunities for our foreign students if they come back to Africa? What will be the trends and the opportunities for those students?
I tell you, Italy and China have a very, now we're looking at, and I'm looking at a detailed plan of cooperation. We signed this MOU with China to cooperate in Africa, and also with Japan and other countries. So the goal for us is to ensure that Africa is stable from an economic and social point of view. That's the overall goal. And then below we have identified two main sectors. One is construction, urbanization, and the other one is agricultural. And the way we're doing it is we are having Italian company and Chinese company trying to bid together to get projects from the local government. The financing is done by either the Chinese Development Bank or Exim Bank and our own equivalent in Italy. They do trade or investment financing to the host country within limits, of course, to avoid the debt trap and other problem. But the idea behind is that China, although has a lot of money to go into Africa, sometimes they need a European partner to work with, because that makes it easier from a communication, soft power point of view, reputational point of view, and so we can offer that. In addition, Italian and Chinese company can, it depends on how you see it. Sometimes they can look like a competing industry because we do similar things, but then if you do instead of doing like this, that you compete with each other, if you move a little bit down, you can actually go into complementary skills. And so we can have Italian companies to provide, for example, components or construction work for China construction, for example. And in that case, we can do the same also for agricultural. Agricultural machinery, as I gave you the example in India, is also something that we want to push into Africa, because Africa is going through the same development model that we've seen in China. migration, rural to urban, and urbanization based on infrastructure and transport. And Italy has a very strong presence and expertise in those two sectors, construction and agriculture. And so this is what China is doing in Africa, as well as energy, and this is what Africa needs.
Yeah,
So these are the two sectors that if there are, for example, students from Africa that would like to explore more, these are the two areas that we can help to engage more in a specific. You're welcome.
Thank you. Question just there. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm very curious about your experience as taking several occupations like professors, economists, and politicians. How can you balance different jobs and identity in your career, and which occupation is the most important for you at the moment?
Sorry, which what? Sorry?
Now, which occupation is most important for you at the moment?
Which what? Sorry?
Occupation.
The one I do now.
Yes.
That's the most important. That's it, no? Was there another question? No.
Okay, thank
Next
you.
question.
We have a question here. Thank you, and then at the front.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, thank you, Professor Garaki, for sharing your wonderful insight with us, with all of our audience. I'm a teaching staff from the translation and interpreting. So I'm privileged to be here, to be present here, to enjoy your speech. Okay, before I raise my question, I've got to tell you my experience. Actually, about 14 years ago, and I had this great chance to visit Italy. I remember I landed in Milan, and I spent 8 days, and all the way down to the Rome. And I shall never forget the time and we spent in Rome, and there was no end to things to do and things to see. And it was very wonderful, and the city had to, we were so excited by all that the city had to offer to us. We went out the crossing and even without thinking about the cost. It's a very wonderful experience. Okay, now, my question is, it's a little bit, it's quite specific, okay, about Italian cars.
Italian cars.
Cars, yeah.
Ciccio.
Yeah, 汽车, 对的.
Okay.
Automobile. And when I came back from abroad, and the very first car actually is an Italian car. It's an economical car. It's a Fiat. 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 Oh, I even forget because I didn't drive so long. But anyway, it's an Italian car. It's a very good Italian car. But over the time, as I have been observing, the number of Italian cars running on the street is declining.
The number of cars on?
Running on the street.
In Italy?
No, in China.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah, it's declining. So I just wonder, in China, there was a big, great potential market for cars. As you have known, maybe you have observed, a big pie of the car market has been divided greatly by Germany and Japan and America. And I would like to see more Italian cars in China. So I just wonder, does Italian government have any plan on promoting Italian cars?
Okay,
Chinese
I'll tell you the
market.
answer.
Yeah.
You don't see Italian cars on the street, but there are.
I do see some, but not as many as I expected.
I tell you where Italian cars are
Okay.
inside every German car.
Oh. Oh, really?
Every
Oh, really? I know the Italian engine is wonderful.
Every German car that you see in the streets in China
Yeah.
has 40% by Italian components.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
wonderful.
Good. So
I'm
we're done. We don't
surprised.
need. So we support Mercedes, Audi, BMW. The more they sell into China, the better is for Italian companies.
Oh, I see.
So we do intermediate goods, but we still very much part of the market. We are not in the final good because there are not many Fiat, but there are many Iveco. And many Maserati, by the way. You should buy a
Right,
Maserati,
right.
it's very
Look,
easy.
that's
So you buy
luxurious.
I'm
That's
paying.
luxurious.
Very
It's not
good car.
affordable for the
We only
middle
do the
class
base.
even. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
3 questions on that side. And then if there's somebody over here, then put your hand up, we can come next.
Okay, so...
And sorry, and let me tell you one more thing. On Wednesday, we are opening a big factory in Nanjing with brakes, that makes brakes for cars. So people, Brembo, very big Italian company, and people don't know because, of course, no one, users don't buy brakes, they buy cars, but it's inside the cars again. So we do lots of these things, just something as a practical example.
Sorry, we go.
You see?
Professor Geraci, very honored to attend your speech, and totally agree with your mention about the uncertainty decrease when we do business with the 2 countries. And our President Xi has paid a very official visit to Italy last month. And I very delighted to find that apart from the national oil companies that attend the Sino-Italy third-party market forum, there's a group of private companies, including the FACE. One of the companies called FACE, it is the private-owned companies in Ningbo. And my question is that, is there any other possibilities? Because the transnational companies has played a very important role between the 2 countries' economic cooperations. So do you think there's a big space existing between China and Italy in terms of these transnational big companies?
Let me understand. You mean more Italian companies to invest here?
Yeah, because the FACE company I mentioned is the company who's mainly engaged in the surf motor. It's a kind of, you have learned the electronic engineering, and this is the very important part of the industrial lines. So do you think these R&D corporation companies or these transnational companies will will have more space in Italy's market? And will it have a good influence in China and Italy as third-party market?
I think so, because I mentioned that this cooperation that we want to establish is based on first layer is a better knowledge of each other. And so if I move this to the business layer, the common research is something that we want to do, and we do it with China, common research on technology and many other, space activity, IT, artificial intelligence, very tightly between Italian and Chinese universities. For example, Tsinghua has a common research center with the University of Polytechnic of Milan on engineering. So this is something that we want to do. And also from what I said before, this is the kind of investment activity that tick the box of being greenfield. Yes. Because this means opening up a research center. It means opening up knowledge sharing activity, and it also means giving jobs to young graduates in Italy and here. So yes. And so any suggestion on this, do let us know.
I have suggestions on this because I come from the investment promotion department of local government, and we spend a lot of time for promoting the bilateral investment cooperations between Ningbo and the other countries like the US. And we.
If you have a list of companies that we can acquire,
yeah, we have.
Let us know, because
I do the industrial research, especially in the field of the manufacturing industries.
Okay.
Ningbo plays a very active role in China in this field. So
okay.
I would like to know whether Italy has this kind of a database or the information transparency so that will help us to do the pitch making accurately.
We do have the database, but we don't know, that's why I ask you, what are the companies in Ningbo that could be acquired by Italian companies. That we don't know. So if you tell us, I will tell the Italian companies, and if they're interested in investing here, they can look at the list.
If it is possible, I can write an email to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it'd be good to make more of those links between Ningbo's investment promotion at Italy, and I'm happy to play a role in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, welcome back, Mikhail.
Thank you, Leili.
Well, thank you for giving a nice briefing on situations in Italy, EU, and also this Belt Road Initiative, MOU. I've got two related questions. So we all know Chinese firms have been expanding tremendously in the international markets over the past 1.5 decades. But researchers and also practitioners both observed that many Chinese companies are still facing a lot of challenges in engaging the local stakeholders, in particular in the, we call developed Western world. So for example, the stakeholders including like government, media, competitors, employees. So my first question is, what is the situation in Italy and for Chinese firms in terms of engaging the government, employees, like local communities, the media, the situation? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear. What's the situation for Chinese company to engage? Where exactly?
Engaging these stakeholders, like the government, local communities, the media. So because we have observed and the Chinese companies facing difficulties or challenges, sometimes they don't have good relationships with the employees, local employees. Sometimes they don't have the good relationships with the media, with the local government. So just want to understand the Chinese company's situation in Italy in terms of their engagement with these local stakeholders.
I tell you, from the few, because I told you, we're looking at roughly 20 billion of Chinese investment in Italy. 7 billion was on one transaction, Pirelli. Then we had Candy, bought by Haier. Then we have some motorcycle company, two very important M&A football teams. The football teams, they complain that the new owner is not buying new players. So that would be a nice follow-up activity. But that's very important because this is the perception that some Italian public opinion may have of Chinese acquisition. Pirelli, no one knows about it. AC Milan, Inter Milan, everyone knows about it because Chinese have chosen a very popular industry. I think the relationship is good. There has been, for example, no issue with outsourcing production outside of the country because this is the red line. Like if we have company doing M&A in Italy and then they move production in Slovenia, that is a no-go. Because, of course, we cannot do that, and this has not happened. So from this point of view, it's very good. I tell you the case of Pirelli, no change in the employee relationship. The important thing was, in that case, the governance. And the fact that in the article of the association after the merger with ChemChina, it was stated that only with 90% of the vote, ChemChina could move production outside of Italy or could enter the dispute with laborers. And so basically, in a way, to make it simple, Chinese acquisition in Italy have been so far very successful because although it's been a strategic buyer, they have behaved as a financial buyer. So they didn't really enter too much into the management of the local activity, and the value that they brought is to help entering the Chinese market. So very good perception, no major problem being created. The only, let's say, negative is that neither they brought a lot of value to the country. They brought value to the old shareholder. So no problem, but no big value either. So they, because they didn't do greenfield. So people don't perceive, China comes to Italy and has created jobs, has given jobs to young graduates. Again, it's a transaction on the secondary market with neutral, I would say, which in my view is good because this is set the stage for this new kind of relationship. So there is nothing to fix. But hopefully now we get the positive investment. And we already did last week when we signed some additional agreement with CCCC trying to cooperate with the two ports in the north of Italy to expand the capacity. If we can get more ships from Costco, from Nimbo, arriving into Genova instead of Rotterdam, that would be very positive for the overall perception of Chinese investment because it's not perceived like in Greece, you buy the ports, and then you have that trap like in Djibouti or Sri Lanka. We obviously have not that trap problem, but people still have, they cannot do the math, so they think there would be a risk. But if Chinese company could help expand the capacity of a pier, of a port, and then make more ships arriving, so if the TEU goes to 500,000 to 1 million, that's the thing that would be concrete.
A very quick second question is, to what extent do you think Italy will be open to Huawei?
Sorry?
To what an extent Italy will be open to Huawei?
Huawei.
To what extent? To what extent?
华为是什么意思？没听说过。Why is everyone obsessed with Huawei? I mean, it's just a company, no? And it's been in Italy for 10 years. It's not new, eh? Huawei provides equipment to Italy, to Telecom Italia, Mobile, since 2005, I think. We did the 12th anniversary. So in Huawei, we are, very neutral. We are, there are all these things being talked about. If there is a problem, we will address it. But at the moment, we have no evidence either way. So it's a very neutral wait-and-see approach. And you see, that's what we published on the website, official website of our government. If someone has a problem, we're happy to hear it, and we will examine. But so far, we are no specific incidents of anything.
I think we have time for one more question. Did you want to ask? Oh, it's already been asked. So one more question. Anybody? Towards the back there.
Okay. As a European citizen, I was thinking, as the European Union is currently under pressure due to the Yellow Vest...
Microphone.
Oh. Okay. As the European Union is currently under pressure due to the Yellow Vest movement and Brexit and such, does Italy's promotion and national cost-benefit analysis endanger the unity of European Union? Meaning, does this signal more adds to the frictions within the European Union?
Sorry, I can't hear very well. Can you hear me when I talk?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so I thought it was...
Okay, does this Italy's promotion of national cost and benefit analysis endanger the unity of European Union? And
no.
Meaning, does this
no.
signal and
why would he endanger the unity of the European Union if we sign the MOU on the Belt and Road?
I was just wondering, because this, someone could say this implies an divergence, like Macron said, that there needs to be coordinated approach.
Sorry, someone?
Like Macron said, there needs to be a coordinated approach within the European Union to China relations. I was just wondering, do you think this could be something signaling in the European Union?
Sorry, maybe I didn't hear. You said Macron said what?
Macron said something about coordinated approach to this relation. And I was just wondering, does this, or could someone imply that this adds to the frictions within the European Union?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think the friction will disappear because, as I told you, Luxembourg has signed also the same MOU. And do you know what the specific importance of Luxembourg?
No.
The Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Union, is from Luxembourg. And so he has been very silent these days, and no criticism about Luxembourg. And so we think now that the European Union is slowly changing their minds. And so I think Italy has led the way to sign it, and we got all the criticism, the big countries, and now when other countries sign it, people don't talk about it anymore. And so this is a sign of maybe Europe coming united again, if you wish, but closer to the position of doing more business with China, which is what everyone does. By the way, you probably should know that China has invested in the ports of Marseille, Le Havre, Dunkirk, Rotterdam, Valencia, Bilbao, Piraeus, Al Said, Gibraltar, Istanbul, many others, everywhere. So China does investment into Silk Road activity and has been doing it already for many years.
It could also like enhance the competition within European Union as people promote their own countries and such.
Sorry, say again?
So it could also enhance the competition within the European Union as...
Of course, there will be competition, yes.
Sure.
There is competition. You know, countries that have ports have allowed China to invest in those ports. Countries that don't have ports, or they have ports, but let's say Germany, that has ports, but they also have a train that goes from Duisburg to Chongqing. And that's another Silk Road. That's the land route of the Silk Road. So, you know what? My view is that the Silk Road already exists in Europe. And China's presence in Europe is already stronger than people maybe know. And so we all want to do business with China peacefully. I see more countries joining in. Some countries already sold assets to China. Some countries will sell. And as I said, Italy has been leading this activity. And when you lead, you always take a bit of hit and heat because you are doing something new. Okay?
Thank you.
I think we have come to the end of our time. I know there are more questions. But apologies if you haven't been able to ask that. I'd really like to thank Michela for coming back here to the University of Nottingham in Ningbo. And we're sorry to have seen you go in terms of your work with our students and staff, but we're delighted in what you've been doing in Italy and in fact for the broader world in terms of trade, investment and other areas. So let me thank you again and congratulate you on your work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please keep in touch, okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for your coming. For the journalists, please go with me. We'll go to the next room for a 20 minutes interview. Thank you.